Okay, I got the thumbs up to get started. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone? All right. So today's talk is about how to give Catalyst some swag. Swag, in this case, is actually the Swagger specification. My name is Logan Bell, and I'm a senior developer at MediaMath. We do lots of interesting things with Catalyst, also with Go and some other languages. So I forgot to mention this at the other talk, but we are hiring. So look for one of us with these T-shirts and come talk to us. I go by Epic Bell on Twitter. My CPAN ID is Logie, L-O-G-I-E, and I'm also found on IRC every once in a while lurking as Epic Bell. So there are 5 key things I hope you will get from this talk. You'll receive a basic understanding of what Swagger is if you're not familiar with what it is. You'll understand how this may help you with your REST API and how it can help you. We'll go over one possible way of setting it up within Catalyst, and we'll demonstrate a bit of open source code that MediaMath open sourced. We will go over how Swagger allows you to actually generate clients based off of a Swagger endpoint. And then we'll look at some other open source options. So what is Swagger? So it's lifted straight from swagger.io. Swagger is a project used to describe RESTful APIs. There are 2 primary versions out there in the wild. There are others, version 1.2 and version 2.0. 1.2 is probably more prevalent, but I think things are moving rapidly to 2.0. So essentially, Swagger, all it is JSON, and it's a data structure. And that data structure can be parsed by various readers, and it describes resources in your API. So for example, you can say that this route accepts this following parameters, and it will return this sort of data. So it's useful for various reasons, which I'll go into here. So yeah, so why Swagger and why is it useful? It gives us a consistent interface for clients. So theoretically, you can have a Swagger endpoint, and then you can have a parser that parses it, and it will generate clients for you in various languages. So you no longer have to maintain various clients for all of your APIs. It also helps with testing just because it's a consistent interface. So let's just kind of give you an example of how you may want to explore an API. Here is this is an open source project here called Swagger UI, and it parses Swagger. So basically this project is going to a route up there called petstore swagger.io. And it's reading the Swagger route, and it's generating all this data based off of it. And we can see that it supports 3 major routes or resources: pet, store, and user. And if we look down in this particular route here, we can actually pass in parameters, and over here there's a model and a model schema, and it describes what this resource expects as a post parameters. So we can actually send something to this. So we're going to create a new pet, and his name's going to be Bow Wow, and we can try it out. And what it does is it actually talks to this API out on the internet somewhere, and we get back a response at 200, and it shows us what the headers are. Anyways, the point though is not necessarily what the response is, but seeing the schema information and seeing that what sort of parameters it accepts into the API. Okay, so this talks a little bit about Catalyst too. Just a quick show of hands, who uses Catalyst? Okay, so I'm glad everybody knows what it is. So for the few that didn't, Catalyst is one of the oldest and probably one of the most popular frameworks out on CPAN. We use it extensively at MediaMath. We actually have one of the core contributors works at MediaMath, John Naprikowski, and we use it for a couple APIs, and it's a very important project for us. So right now on my laptop, I have a Catalyst application running, and there's a route on there called API docs, and we can take a look here and see what the JSON looks like. Okay, so this is actually hitting this route. Hold on, I learned a new trick at the last talk. You put this here. Okay. Okay, so here's the Catalyst application running in debug mode here. Let me spin it back up, and let's redo that. So just to really demonstrate, see, it's hitting this route here called API docs. And what we see here is a different view. So what I was showing you with Swagger UI was something that was parsing something like this. And this is just JSON here. And we're describing various operations that our particular RESTful API supports. So for example, we have a test2 route down there. And it supports a get operation and has doesn't really have a lot of information there, but down here we have some other meta information about our particular service. We have, which version of Swagger is this particular one's using version 1.2, and some information and whatnot. So Swagger is just really metadata. And if you just think of it as a way to decorate your routes. So yeah, so as I mentioned, where's that coming from? So it's coming from this route called API docs. And one of the cool things about working at MediaMath is that they have a fairly liberal open source policy. And we actually wrote a controller called Swagger. And it's out in GitHub. I'll have the link at the end of the talk here. It's not yet on CPAN because we'd like to refine it a bit more. But if you want to have this special route called API docs, you just use base Catalyst controller Swagger. And there's also a utility function. If you use Swagger, there's an add meta. So, and I'll demonstrate what that means, but that's a way to basically decorate routes. So to expose a route in Catalyst, you just use the Swagger attribute. Now this is showing an action here. We're using the local, and for those who are not really familiar with Catalyst routes, a local is just, we're just saying we're creating a route called test2. And we're marking it as a route that we want it to be exposed within the API docs JSON. To configure this within your root PM or where you put your configuration, this is just basically how you would do it. You just say Swagger and some keywords there. And all that really is just some meta information that's going to be exposed as JSON. There's nothing really too magical going on there, but basically the most important thing is we specify which version. Also, it works, I think, fairly decently with chaining, so you can just mark like something at the end of the route as a Swagger route, and it'll be exposed. And as I mentioned, there was that add meta function, and that allows you to basically say, so our test1 route, it's going to have it's going to accept the following parameters. These are the types that it accepts. And here's a response message that we'll also accept. So here's what happens when a 404 is received or something along those lines or some other error code that you want to handle. So why don't we try it out? So so we go back to this Swagger UI. We can actually just punch in our local server here. One moment. Okay, so you can see that it is going to our API docs here. It parses it, and it now is describing our very simple API. We can see that we have a Git, we support a Git and a post here, and some very basic sorts of things that accepts, it has path parameters that you can fill in and whatnot. And let me figure out how to get back to talk. Okay. Okay, so the next step you can do is you can actually generate clients. So there's actually, there's a few open source projects out there, and one of them is called Swagger CodeGen. It's a Java, well, I might be saying this wrong. I think it may be Scala. I haven't looked too closely in the details. But anyways, it's a project out there, and the whole point of it is it has a series of templates for various languages, and if you're interested in having a language supported by Swagger, you go and you fill out these templates, and you compile, and then you can then have a custom client that will know how to parse Swagger and generate client code for you. Now, as of this talk, the Perl support was nearly non-existent. I did see recently on Perl Monks that somebody had gone ahead, and it was great timing for my talk, created a development branch that has a Perl version. And so I'll demonstrate how that works and what this means. Okay, so let me check out that project and I'll show you here. Okay, so this is just that project I just mentioned, which is the Swagger CodeGen. Pay no attention to all the crazy bash stuff going on here. However, this is just basically, as it's written in Java, you have to set up all these million environment variables. But so down here, the key thing is there's generate, and what we're saying is we want to read this API docs. API docs is the exact same JSON file that I showed you earlier. See, JSON. And we want to generate the Perl version of this, and we're going to output it to this directory called test app. So if we go ahead and run this, okay, so you can see what it does is it actually parses that JSON, and then it generates all of this client code. So now what we can do, since we have all that client code, we can actually, I have an example here where we can actually write a script, and we have our API client. We can say, give me the default client, and I want to get some output from my get test2 route here. And I want to, it actually comes with a 2-hash method, and I want to read the value out of it. So let's run that. Oh, you know, basic things like getting the right libraries. Okay, and it throws a couple warnings, which I don't really understand, but the output there is test, and and we can demonstrate that it's actually hitting our test2 route right there. We hit test2, and the value coming back was test. So that just demonstrates we generated some custom Perl code based off of our JSON, and then we hit our API, and we can ship that to the world now. So here's just a view in my slide of the code I just demonstrated. Okay, so where can you learn more? You can learn more by just going to swagger.io. It's an open source specification. It has all the specifications there. The next link is the open source project that we're working on at MediaMath. And it's only on GitHub right now. I did notice within the last couple months that somebody is sending out a Swagger 2 library on CPAN, and it looks very promising. And it actually has some interesting things in there where it'll actually verify your Swagger 2 is correct. So it looks very good, so you might want to check that out. So yeah, so in summary, I mean, I think Swagger is pretty cool. It'll allow you to, I think the most powerful part is that you can just generate clients in many languages, but it does need a little bit more Perl love. Some of the stuff I was showing you is a bit hacky, and we need to get out there and start releasing some of the stuff in Perl before the JavaScript guys take over the world. All right, so that's the end of my talk. Is there any questions? Yes, in the back corner. Great question. So the question was, what is the difference between Swagger and SOAP? Well, Swagger, okay. So SOAP is, I'm not really familiar with SOAP. I actually have never used it, although I hear a lot of hate about it. But Swagger it's just JSON, and it may be similar in spirit, but I believe it's very lightweight. Yeah, I think that would be a correct statement. Any other questions? Yes, in the back. Yes. Okay, so let me see if I can repeat that question. Is there a better approach than using auto-generated code? Is that pretty much the question? Mm-hmm. Yes, so what I was demonstrating is really for demo purposes, but I wouldn't, I'm not certain, like, you would probably want to package those up, like as a module of some sort. There would probably be a next step as far as how do you deploy or distribute your client code. I'm not certain if that answers your question, but that's what I would do. Yes, Jay. Good question. So the question is, if I put business logic in my controllers, how does it show up in Swagger? It will not. So Swagger is, I think of it as, it's just documentation for your endpoints. So you need to decorate your Swagger docs. When you call that function add meta, you have to add that meta information in there. Yes. Yes, which I showed back here under. And I may not have been very clear there, so let's, right here, adds. That's how you'd add the meta information. Yes. Yeah. It wouldn't be much work. I would probably advocate taking a look at the Swagger 2 library that's out there, because it looks very complete. But ours is written in such a way that it doesn't have to work. If you can write a dancer plugin, you could probably hook it up to a dancer plugin. Okay. Well, that completes my talk. Thank you, everybody.